In 1944, Adolf Hitler's forces still occupied most of the Europe. The world had already suffered 5 years of brutal war and more than 50 million lives had been lost. The Allies needed a breakthrough, a way to punch through Nazi-occupied fronts and begin the liberation of Western Europe. That breakthrough came with Operation Overlord, what we now call D-Day, the largest military operation undertaken in history, and one man had to make the call: General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme commander of Allied forces in World War II. Over 156,000 Allied troops, nearly 7,000 naval vessels, and more than 11,000 aircrafts, all converging on 5 heavily fortified beaches in Normandy. Facing them were entrenched German defenders with bunkers, machine guns, mines, and artillery.
Allied weather experts predict gale winds striking the coast of France all day, June 5th.
The weather was awful. Clouds, rough seas, and strong winds. Advisors were splitted. Some believed the invasion should be delayed again. Others feared that postponing would give the Germans time to reinforce. Eisenhower had just hours to decide. If he chose wrong, the consequences would be catastrophic. Massive Allied casualties, a devastating blow to morals, and a potentially prolonged war in Europe. And yet, he made the call to proceed. Eisenhower wrote a note accepting full responsibility in case the mission failed. If any blame or fault attached to the attempt, it is mine alone. This one line revealed a deep truth about Eisenhower's character, his accountability, humility, and moral courage. But was the decision appropriate? Was it effective? We need to understand what Eisenhower faced to answer that. Eisenhower wasn't just planning a military attack. He was fighting the greatest evil in human history. The Nazi regime was murdering millions of innocent people. They had taken over most of the Europe and were brutalizing entire population. The numbers were harsh but clear. D-Day would cost lives. Nearly 4,500 Allied soldiers died that day. But waiting means more death in concentration camps, more executions, more suffering under Nazi rule. Every day, Hitler's forces stayed in power meant thousands more innocent people would die. Eisenhower understood that sometimes the most moral choice is also the most painful one. From an ethical standpoint, stopping genocide justified the sacrifice. The right thing to do was to act, even knowing the terrible cost. He didn't make his choice alone. For 7 consecutive days, he met with every commanders, listening to their concerns, weighing their advice, and considering every option. But here's what made him truly ethical. He never tried to share the blame. He wrote his failure message before the invasion, accepting complete responsibility. He drew a heavy line under mine alone. If the invasion failed, he would take all the blame. Even more powerful, on the final night, Eisenhower visited the 101st Airborne, the very troops facing the highest casualties. He looked this young man in the eye, asked about their families, even showed them fishing techniques to calm their nerve. This wasn't just about leadership. It was about ethical leadership. If you're going to send men to die, you owe them the respect of facing them personally. As those planes disappeared in the darkness, his aide saw tears in his eyes. "Well, it's on," he said quietly. This was a man who felt the weight of every life he was risking. Eisenhower wasn't seeking fame or trying to advance his career. If D-Day failed, history would remember him as the man who lost the war. His motivation came from something deeper, his belief in the dignity and the worth of every human life. 8 years later, at a veterans reunion, Eisenhower broke down crying while looking at men he would once thought he was sending to their death. This burden made him a better leader.
Eisenhower demonstrated authentic leadership through 4 key qualities which worked together under unimaginable pressure. First was his integrity. His philosophy was simple: leaders must take full blame for anything that goes wrong. This prepared failure message proves he meant it. He wasn't just talking about responsibility, he was willing to stake his entire reputation on it. Then there was his authenticity. Everything about Eisenhower matched up. When he said he cared about soldiers, he actually visited them personally. When he claimed responsibility, he put it in writing. There was no gap between his words and his actions. What really set him apart was his commitment to something bigger than himself. Eisenhower wasn't fighting for personal glory or career advancement. He was fighting for liberation. This greater purpose inspired others and gave meaning to the enormous sacrifice that he was asking of his troops. Finally, he took full responsibility for everything. Eisenhower made himself totally accountable. No blaming the weather, no blaming the politicians, no blaming bad luck. If something went wrong, it was his fault. If it went right, the credit belonged to others. These 4 qualities working together supported his ethical decision making, which were taken under the most extreme pressure imaginable.
You are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months.
As dawn broke on D-Day, the battlefield descended into chaos. German guns unleashed a relentless storm of fire, smoke, and screaming metal, tearing through the waves of Allied troops before they even reached the shore. Some vessels suffered over 90% casualties, but the Allies held on. Inch by inch, they pushed forward. By nightfall, over 150,000 troops had landed in France. Though losses were heavy, more than 10,000 Allied casualties, including over 4,400 dead, the invasion succeeded. It marked the beginning of the end for Nazi. Within months, Paris was liberated. Within a year, Hitler was dead, and the war in Europe was over. This outcome confirms that Eisenhower's decision was not just appropriate, it was strategically decisive. It changed the course of world history. On June 5th, 1944, Eisenhower faced history's ultimate leadership test. He refused to stand idle while innocent lives perished under the Nazi regime, even if it meant sending thousands of soldiers to their deaths. He chose action over silence. What made it ethical was how he approached it, with consultation, responsibility, and more courage. The tears in his eyes weren't weakness. They were proof of his humanity. Eisenhower didn't just win a war. He showed us what ethical leadership looks like under ultimate pressure. His D-Day decision proves that ethical leadership isn't just possible under extreme pressure. It's essential. When stakes are highest and choices are hardest, that's exactly when we need leaders who can combine moral courage with strategic thinking. The liberation of Europe began with one man's ethical choice to do the right thing, the right way, for the right reasons, while accepting complete responsibility for the consequences.